We began feeling sick after the rain abated, and the yard remained a slick, muddy mess where the grass hadn't grown back, and the foundation of our new in-ground pool filled to the height of my shins, even though the concrete hadn't yet been poured. Dad wanted us to accept that the illness was just a cold that we all happened to contract at the same time. I believed him, at first. Then, my older brother reached to the point where he'd vomit nearly every hour, and couldn't even keep water in his system. No cold can make you do that, I thought. When my mom started puking all the time too, Dad called in a doctor. She suspected we all suffered from arsenic poisoning, that something contaminated our water supply. Her suggestion didn't make a lot of sense. We'd lived at this house for years without problems before, but we were in no condition to disagree. We were brought to the hospital at the doctor's insistence, but they couldn't find any arsenic in our system. We didn't even have a vitamin deficiency or any of the usual poisoning symptoms. No viruses that they could spot, no bacteria infections, nothing. Maybe the hospital air did us some good, because we had recovered in less than a week. We were a little thinner than before, obviously, but otherwise healthy. They discharged us by the weekend. Back home, Mom forbade us from drinking tap water. We didn't protest, even though Dad had our well water tested not long after we returned, and the results showed no arsenic or mercury or anything. I was still skittish despite the test's findings. I didn't dare drink the water from our faucets. I didn't even wash myself in our house if I could avoid it. I'd opt instead for the mildewed, stallless group showers in the school gym in the mornings. Failing that, I'd clean as much of myself as I could in any free sink in a bathroom. The rest of my family contracted the sickness again within 2 weeks of our hospitalization. The vomiting intensified. They started to lose track of time or the date and seemed confused if I engaged them in any conversation. None of this happened to me. I remained relatively healthy, albeit less clean than I'd like to be. The water had to be the culprit. Nobody believed me, but I knew it had to be the water. One evening, I stood in the backyard to escape a little while from the wrenching sounds that had overtaken the house's usual quiet. I planned to call an ambulance for my family later that night if they didn't show any signs of improvement. It was the right move, but it felt futile nonetheless. The hospital would find nothing medically wrong with them. They'd recover in a few days. They'd return home to repeat the cycle. Who knew how many times they could endure that? Probably no more than a few. If I could barely stand it even once, if my family were to survive, I had to figure out what was the matter. But I didn't have any clue. I was as baffled as the doctors, if not more. So I waited in the yard, collecting my thoughts in the relative quiet of the outdoors, where the sound of someone's disgorging stomach couldn't scatter them. Thick mud choked and scant vegetation grew from the land around me, and only the balding pines at the edge of our yard showed some sign of vitality. Brown water hung, stungent, in the basin of our unfinished pool. Winged insects skirted its surface, and faint wakes quickly fading. I felt the entire yard was diseased, and I imagined that my lungs drew in treadmills of my sama with each breath. I couldn't stand being there. I didn't clear my thoughts. It simply replaced them with a different kind of nausea. I decided I'd take a walk in the woods. Anywhere would be better than where I was. When I came near enough to take a closer look at the pines, they seemed less healthy than I'd first thought. They seemed blighted, their branches dying and collapsing from the bottom up. They weren't alone. None of the plants I saw seemed in good health. Tiny saplings bent over themselves, rotting in their middles. Old oaks stood as barren as telephone poles, their broken limbs a mist at their feet. Out of morbid curiosity, I followed the decay where it seemed most heavily concentrated, and wended my way through the woods along a path of dying plants. Before long, I reached a clearing in the trees. Nothing grew there except for brittle grass that crunched and snapped like glass beneath my steps. Near the clearing's edge, I spotted a small, triangular structure that resembled a poorly tended doghouse. I went over to it. The structure turned out not to be a doghouse, but rather a stone well. A wooden roof, now in the state of collapse, camped over it, a rather enterprising weed, curled around its side, borrowing what little support the disintegrated wood could offer. I looked around for a bucket, but found none. Then I realized that the well had been lidded. Dense wood slabs bordered the well, although they, too, had decomposed heavily. They sagged in the middle beneath the steady pressure of a large stone. At first I figured the stone had been placed there to keep the slabs in place. Then I thought the cover must have been quite weighty enough back in its day to stay in position of its own accord. With such an odd setup as this, the well only became more interesting the longer I considered it. After scrutinizing it for a while, I thought I saw some kind of markings on the stone. Did it carry an inscription? I couldn't read it from my angle. For that matter, I couldn't tell whether the markings were English words or even Latin characters. I walked around the well, leaning in for a better view. I steadied myself amongst the ruined boards. They felt slimy against my bare palms. They were also far more slippery than they appeared. I misjudged my angle, and my hand slid out from under me. My chest thudded against the boards, and I heard a wet, arthritic pop as the aged wood gave way. I felt myself toppling forward, downward. The intelligible stone smashed far below me, invisible in the inky black of the well. I scrambled for a hold on something, anything, but the well's damp inner walls offered no grip. My feet caught the lip of the well, and my ankles strained to support weight they were never meant to carry. I tried to remain calm and devise a means of escaping my precarious situation. I couldn't move too sharply, as I relied solely on my unsteady balance, and whatever protuberance my shoelaces might lasso if I fell any further. The blood rushed to my head. My vision swam. Down below, the snapped wood jutted from the darkness like a shipwreck. My eyes began to adapt. I could detect liquid motions, throwing back the reflection of the light above. I couldn't tell how deep it was, but it didn't matter. I couldn't bank on surviving if I fell in. Between the mats of the broken wood, I glimpsed a disturbance in the water. It began to grow round and smooth. Something was surfacing. An indistinct, gray mass bobbed into sight and floated on the water. It seemed devoid of features, until it flipped over its own weight and revealed its bloated face. It had eyes, a mouth, and a nose, but all of them had swollen horribly and seemed more humanoid than human. Its pallid skin stretched and shone, tight from the years of fluid it had absorbed. Wispy silver hair trailed like lily roots from its scalp into the dark water. Its arms hung limp at its sides. It wore no clothing. I'd never seen a dead body before, but somehow I knew that no corpse could surpass the revolution this one instilled in me. Then it moved, righting itself in one slow, rigid motion. It stood in the center of the well. Water ran from its body. Its head lolled, as if the neck could not carry its burden of its waterlogged skull. Its vicinity, scoping eyelids peeled back, showing two dark, liquid spheres. They stared at me, into me, or perhaps past me. I held my breath, hoping it was blind, or at least that it hadn't noticed me. At the thought, the thing's jaw fell open, and a sticky, rasping noise escaped. A cold, putrid wind swept past my face, and I wrenched. The air had grown nauseous. My aching legs screamed for oxygen. It was too much. I lost control of myself. My arms began to flail, and I lost my tedious hold on the wall. I tumbled forward, banging my head against the stone wall. More out of reflex than flotation, I stuck out my arms and legs. Suspended like a starfish above the yammering creature, I could see it reaching towards me. Mercifully, some distance still separated us. So as not to drop myself into this thing's outstretched hands, I carefully guided one foot up the well's wall. Then I did the same with the other. My palms followed them. I would not chance more than half an inch with each motion. The creature seemed to recognize my intent. It let out a foul cry, and as it subsided, I watched the fallen boards begin rotting at a swift rate. I heard the sounds of small pebbles falling into the water. When one struck me on the back of the head, I realized that The well itself was decomposing around me. I doubled my pace. Soon my fingertips felt the mouth of the well, and I hoisted myself up, too frightened to look behind me. I hurled myself onto the anemic grass. The wooden roof above the well collapsed, crashing into the basin with a sound like falling trees. Had I taken any longer, I thought, that sodden hole would have been my coffin. Exhausted and nauseated, I staggered back to my house. I felt filthy, but I wouldn't dare take a shower. All I could think to do was call the police. I wouldn't tell them my full story, they'd never believe me, but I had, without a doubt, discovered a corpse. Surely it was worth alerting them to it. I told my parents what I told the police after placing the call. They were too fatigued and sickly to do anything to comfort me. Over the next couple days, I brought the police to the well and watched them extract the gray, bloated corpse from its depths with a pulley. The body seemed thoroughly inanimate. They couldn't identify it. Its face was far too deformed to match any of their missing person files. The coroner's office disclosed some pretty troubling findings. Apparently, the body had died long before it was deposited in the well, and its skin had been preserved through some chemical process. Some routine analysis revealed high concentrations of arsenic in the corpse's skin. Apparently, embalming bodies in arsenic solution used to be a common practice long ago. As such, the coroner suspected the body was from the Civil War era. Perhaps, he suggested, that's where the arsenic poisoning came from. I started to wonder whether I had hallucinated my encounter. Nobody else had seen what I did, and a level of disconnect from reality is not uncommon in cases of arsenic poisoning. But how had the body ended up in the well? Furthermore, why had somebody sealed it inside? What had been the purpose of marking the stone? Neither the coroner nor the police had answers for me. Then again, maybe I wasn't asking valid, lucid questions. They interred the body in a local cemetery at the outskirts of our city. Its headstone remained blank. For a corpse that old, that far past identifying, they could not have done anything more. For many years thereafter, the burial marked the end of my story. Recently, though, I returned to my hometown to indulge a pang of nostalgia. Although I had no family left in the area, I paid a visit to retance the roots of my childhood. I saw the old house, under new ownership for several decades. The pool remained pristine, the lawn grew lush and green, the trees flaunted their vibrant canopies. No evidence remained of the damage the plagued corpse had brought, except for images I held in my memories. When I returned to the site of the decaying well, however, I started to notice that it rested at a lower elevation than the old house. A gradual downhill gradient ran from my former home to the well. No contaminant could have traveled upward via the natural forces of gravity and runoff. And when I went to the city's outskirts to inspect the blank headstone, I found nothing grew around it, not even weeds. The earth in its vicinity remained brown and bare. I walked away in a daze, watching my steps to keep myself upright. As I stared at the ground, I spotted a path of adrid dirt snaking from the grave towards town. I hope you ghouls enjoyed my CreepyPasta Monday video. It's kind of creepy, like it's open into interpretation. Like, what do you think it was? Do you think it was the person's mind playing tricks on them? Do you think it was an actual creature in the bottom of the well? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, as always, my last video will be on the top left. My next video will be on the bottom left. All my social medias are on the screen, and they will also be down in the description box below. The word for today will be beanie. Like a beanie you put on your head because it's raining and it's cold, and beanies are so warm and comfy to wear. I don't know. Beanies. But remember, there's always someone or something watching you.